Was that planned to be here, or did they get moved here because of the weather?
I think it was fine.
There's a lot of places that have turf now, though.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of choices. I saw Dover's field, that's pretty nice.
Well, we were up there. We went up there.
Oh, you did? Yeah.
Just one little short thing.
Okay,
I said this.
will you do that in the beginning?
Yeah,
Okay, so where would you like us to park?
Hi.
Hi there. Hi. Barb, nice to meet you in person.
Yeah.
I'm Amy.
What was the question?
Do you want us to set ourselves here or?
No, we'll have you at the table.
Okay.
I'll bring some chairs.
We have some business first, right? Okay.
Just one.
A little bit, one, it won't take 5 minutes.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm feeling chatty. Where do you want this?
I think I'm gonna put them right next to me, unless they need to. Do you,
Oh,
do you need to face the screen, or are you
No,
okay?
we
with the
actually
screen
don't
and
use
everything?
this screen, we have hard copies, so
Awesome.
I'll with that.
You're coming, I know. Hey, like,
Otherwise, they're four.
how's it going?
Help you.
Oh,
Yes, you are.
No, I'm all
Yeah,
good.
you are.
Yes.
Baby.
Hi.
How's your leg doing?
It doesn't even hurt, but I gotta remind myself to take it easy.
Take it easy.
Yeah, yep,
Okay.
don't overdo it. I got all the options, though. I have scooters, I have this.
Just go to the right, right?
Yep, I got a short boot, I got a long boot, I got all the things, so,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. What'd you do?
I missed one step and
Weren't you
just
just
completed it.
Oh, that's from there?
Yeah, and then fractured the heel bone. Like,
No
just
way.
if you're gonna do it good. Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
my goodness.
Yeah, but I don't need
Yeah,
to.
yeah, I guess I was there, just didn't
Yeah.
register.
Yeah,
Cause you walked out of there that night.
I know. I manifested a sprain though. The next day I went to work and I work in OB. The OB doctor was like, what is it? Did you go get an x-ray? I was like, it's sprained. And he's like, you actually don't know that. Let's get an x-ray.
Okay.
So I went down to get an x-ray. The chick came out and she was like,
Yeah, well, that's great.
and I go, okay, so it's broken. And she was like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, your eyebrows did. Your eyebrows did said it all. Like,
Yeah.
so,
You didn't
yeah.
have this very well.
Not at all. We got into ortho and the guy was like, why did you go to work? Like, you need to not go to work. I'm like, oh, let's introduce you. I'm like, I promise I'll be careful. I promise I'll sit. But he said the bone is like pulled back, but it's lined up. So it'll grow like, the bone should connect. But if it doesn't in 6 weeks, then we can look at surgery. And I'm like, that sounds like a long haul. So I've really been like careful and
Yeah.
I just wanted to do this thing and have manifesting healing, so. I know, like, right?
Yeah.
And 2 days later, he pulled his ankle. I'm like, don't you fucking dare. You don't break a bone when I break a bone. Hi, I have a question for you. Do you have a scratch piece?
I don't have it muted.
You don't have a what?
It's not muted.
Oh, I don't care. Does everyone want to learn 5th grade math?
No, it's just when you drop that bomb.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, okay.
Just thinking about that.
In multiplication.
Don't worry, nobody watching.
Okay, great. Do you?
Do standard algebra.
You
Yeah.
do?
You're-
Okay.
Yeah, you
So
can.
if but Charlie's doing something like, are you guys, what is this? Nothing? Or is he just trying to line it up?
He's probably going, well, he's saying, I'm gonna do 5, and
Yeah,
he's, like, we would just tell him, I would tell him to do 3,201 times 10,
yeah.
and 3,021, or 321 times 5, because this is half of that.
And then
This
add
is
up.
half, yeah,
Oh, okay.
like, that's just partial product.
Okay, because he does good when he can do good and he'll get the answer, but he just puts the answer. And I'm like, well, how are you doing it? Because then when he has
Those are
trouble
all up
ones,
here.
yeah, and he has troubled ones or harder ones,
Yeah.
I like walk him through this and then he melts.
down.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's not how he's learning.
It's,
But it
I've
is.
seen the meltdown only notice math. I think because we teach them so many different ways,
Yeah,
because even I taught those ways
yeah,
to 3rd graders,
okay,
and she's not letting me teach her.
yeah.
They pick their way and they don't want to change.
Yeah.
And
I can use this way though.
you could, I mean, there's 5 different ways you could do that.
Yeah, it's,
But just standard algorithm is the carry method,
yeah. And
which
there's
is
no-
what we really want them to be doing by 6th grade.
Yeah,
So
okay.
keep pushing the
We're
same
gonna
grandma
work on
grandpa
it.
way.
Yeah. Sweet, thank you, Ryan. The grandpa way.
This is like musical chairs every time.
Oh, your chairs, or your, yeah, like I said, when when we used to set up this community ed, my niece would be finished with preschool and I'd have to pick her up, so she would put all the names out for me. It'd be different every month.
What a good job for her.
It's not Brandon, I don't know where he went.
Kind of interesting.
Then we got
And you'll be here at 5.
No, I did not. I was in the distance. Was it? Good. It's really been, I wonder, mostly because schools. Like summer, it feels like it's gotten fuller of these. Except both services.
How are you?
Yeah, we're both in the collective.
Sure. Easier.
Hi, friend. Oh, yeah? In my lumberjack outfit? Yeah, my big, like, oh, you should have been there Halloween. Every single person I ran into was like, you should have been a pirate. Okay, thank you, thank you. Yeah, right.
Here's when Michelle fell around them. She was over there for a little while. She was principal.
Not when I was there. No, in St. Peter? Or-
In Seco.
Oh, in West.
Do they have one? I should actually use this.
Yeah.
Well, I think I-
They're from home.
Right. I don't know how young, got a century.
Sure.
Hi. My dad's good. Good.
You're
Good, it's not bad. I have no
Oh, well,
idea
they,
what
you
it's
would
at,
know.
but I tried to follow
Crowd
that.
maintenance.
No, he said it's
Yeah.
not close together, but it's better if it's
Well, or
close together than that.
she's married.
So,
When she was principal?
Get out of your car.
His family.
His family.
Oh,
So it
so
is
it is
Ralph.
Ralph, okay.
Our next vote, yeah. So probably we're- Ours is so long, I would not do it. Yeah, yeah, but
Somewhere like happy to do Sunday, doing all.
yeah, we can.
Yes, you are, your next meeting. You drew the short straw.
I drew the right straw.
Just. Thank you. You need a machine together? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock, so we will get started. We have, it'll be a little bit longer meeting today. Short agenda, but longer meeting. So we will call the special school board meeting of Independent School District 204 to order. We do have everyone here tonight. We'll stand for pledge of allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, thank you everybody for coming. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mark, and a second. Thank you, Angie. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of agenda, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Consent agenda. We just have the one item on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Mark, and a second.
Second.
Thanks, Kate. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carried. We have one action item. This is the application form for Minnesota State High School League. I think this is an annual approval we do every year.
They give us money, scholarship money for students that need help with activities.
So do we have a motion to approve the resolution, the Form A application resolution for Minnesota State High School League?
So moved.
Thanks, Amy, in a second.
A second.
Thanks, Kate. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of the approval of the resolution supporting Form A application of the State High School League Foundation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The motion carries. And we're on to communication. And I will turn it over to Superintendent Thompson to give us a little intro in this meeting.
Okay, well, thank you for coming to the part here. Maybe Jordan will be with us. I think you're going to be leading this process. Oh, great.
Not tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the future.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we worked with MSBA, you approved that, working with MSBA, we're excited to work with MSBA in this process. You know, we've talked about a timeline, a potential timeline and some things that are happening, but we're gonna have this meeting and then the planning meeting and start on our way. So thank you for coming down and being part of us doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's nice to meet all of you in person. I recognize some faces, and we're excited to get started on the search with you. Tonight's workshop is going to be based upon our booklet, Hiring the Right Superintendent, which you all have. I'll give you just a little bit of preface to what we're going to do, and I'd like to do a round of introductions, if that's all right with everyone. Typically, this workshop is done in a very generic format, because you'll notice when we go through it, the first thing we talk about is whether or not to work with a consultant and what that involves and what the differences are when you do a search on your own versus a consultant. But in this case, you've already chosen to hire MSBA. So it gives us the opportunity to provide the generic information, but tailor it to MSBA's process. So in a way, we're getting a head start on the planning meeting, which is scheduled for November 27th at 3 p.m., right? So I think there's a lot we can cover tonight that you'll recognize at the planning meeting, but this gives us an opportunity for you to ask questions about the process as we go through sort of the best practices of a search tailored to how MSBA conducts a search, not just a generic search process itself. So we would welcome questions throughout. We want this to be informal, And we want to answer everything and anything you need to know about the search. And then we'll come back, of course, and have more conversations at the planning meeting. So before we start, does that sound okay to everyone? With that? Okay.
And also there's a booklet on the public table.
Yes.
It just needs to stay on the table.
Correct. I'm going to start with introductions with one of my favorites, which is please share with me your name, but I put these little cheat sheets, thank you for those. But how long you've served on the Kasson-Mantorville School Board or worked here, and where you graduated from high school. I'm always interested to find out that. So I'll start because I opened a can of worms with this. So I'm Barb Dorn, and I'm the Director of Leadership Development and Executive Search at MSBA. I've been there for coming up on 5 years now, and I work exclusively in superintendent search and superintendent evaluation. And I graduated from Lake Crystal High School before it became Lake Crystal Welcome Home. I was Southern Minnesota, Lake Crystal Welcome Home. A long time ago. We don't have to give years, so don't start saying the year you graduated or you're gonna make me look bad. So that's me. So if it's okay, which way you wanna go?
I can go next.
Okay.
Carlin Peterson, I am in my, I believe, 9th year, 8.5 years cumulatively. And I graduated from here.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Dave Thompson, I've been here for almost 3 months. So although I have been in the area for a long time, I graduated from St. Charles High School.
St. Charles. I think I knew that.
Ken Hart from the school board, been on the board for about 15 years, graduated from Medford, Minnesota, which is out around 35W between Old Town and Fair.
Kate Ryan, I am just finishing my first year on the board, and I graduated from Cedar Falls High School in Iowa.
Cedar Falls, Iowa. Did Ragbri ever go through Cedar Falls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I may have ridden through, I went on that twice when I was in college. Everyone knows the Register's Annual Great Bike Ride across Iowa. I did it twice, but I was much younger. And I remember staying in communities like Cedar Falls. That was really a wonderful experience. So.
Yeah, we have University of Northern Iowa there too, so all kinds of things have their own there, but I think Grace Rice come by a few times. Yeah.
Wow. Quite a thing. Nice to meet you, Kate.
All right.
Brandon Maderi, been on the board here for 11 years and graduated from Kasson-Mantorville.
Kasson-Mantorville. Great, thank you, Brandon.
Amy Olson, I have been on the board just finishing up my 7th year, and I graduated from Winona Cotter.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you, Amy.
Mark Torkelson, be the 5th year, going on 6th,
Okay.
and I graduated from Forest City, Iowa.
Forest City, Iowa. I've never gone through Forest City.
We went through there a few times.
Did it?
Yeah, we hated it. A bunch of homeless people taking over our town.
Oh, it's crazy. There's like 10,000 people on bikes. Forest City's bigger than 10,000 people.
Well, with college.
With a college it might be. Cedar Falls is larger, I know. But when these bikes come through and they set up tents everywhere, you know what it sounds like.
Yeah, I've done it, yeah.
But it sometimes like times 100, 2,000 population town, and you have 80,000 people trying to put up tents and use up all the hot water, and it's just crazy. So I can see what people like it so much. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Hi, I'm Angie Richards. I am my 9th or 10th year on the board, something of that nature. I graduated from a school that is now called Glenville County West. It was a lot of different letters when I graduated.
What was it when we graduated?
It was Bellevue, Danube, Grenville, Sacred Heart. So they converted to it as BDRSH.
Wow. Now it's Renville County.
Renville County West, so
Okay.
western Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you, Angie.
Patrick Maderi, also just finishing up my first year
Okay.
on the board and graduated from Kasson-Mantorville.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Amy Jordan, and I am finishing up. No, I'm just kidding. I have been with MSBA for over a year now, and I'm the executive search specialist. And I graduated from Wasika High School.
That I did know. You did know. Well, thank you for doing that, because one, it's just nice to hear.
I did not do brake bride, so I was not one of those homeless people taking back to your hometown. You're welcome.
Just like you. Okay. It's really great to hear where people have graduated from, because it gives me some context of the geographic lenses you all bring to this. And I think it's really good because you have a couple of KM grads here, as well as folks from elsewhere in Minnesota and from out of state. That breadth of viewpoints bodes really well for a search, because you're coming from several different places in terms of your life experiences and where you grew up and where you graduated from. So that diversity of thought is really good. The other thing that I'm really pleased to see for your superintendent search is you have people with new lenses. They've been on the board for a year, as well as up to 11 and 15 years. So you've got a lot of fresh perspectives, as well as institutional knowledge, people who've been on the board a long time. So again, similarly, I would say that's a really good sign for this search, is the different places you're coming from with your experience on this board. So both really, really good pieces of news. Before we dive into this booklet, I do need to tell you one thing that might seem odd is Amy's going to stand up and take some pictures of us, if it's okay with you. Our director of communications doesn't have any pictures of our superintendent search team working in districts. So are you willing to allow her to take some photos of us working together tonight? Yes, yeah, you're good? Okay.
And if you're going to the leadership conference in January, you might see those photos there.
Just
That's
might.
what they're for.
Just might. So if she suddenly stands up and snaps pictures, you'll know what it is. And you don't have to smile, but you should look very engaged. And really interested in what we have to say. So that would be my request. But if you're not, just please don't fall asleep, because there's a lot to talk about. It's about an hour and a half workshop, maybe 2 hours. Whatever time we spend tonight answering your questions, I think will help make the planning meeting more efficient as well, because typically the planning meeting goes at least 2 hours. There's a lot of questions.
Okay, I'm mixed those up, so.
That's okay.
Good news, hour and a half too.
You just never know. Some boards have lots of questions and some have almost none. So we'll stay here as long as you need, both tonight and on the 27th. Have any of you on the board been through a superintendent search before? If you have, please raise your hand. So Kent has. Brandon, have you been through a search? Okay. How long was the previous superintendent here?
12.
I say 11 years, that's a long tenure for a board. Okay, so Kent is the only one who's been through a search. All right. Some of this might be similar for you to the last search, Kent, but a lot of it might be new, because I think best practices have changed and evolved in terms of superintendent search in the last 12 years. So if you would now, grab your books. These are yours to keep, so please write in them anything and everything that you want to make note of. And sometimes you'll have things that you don't have a question on tonight, but you might in the meantime. And so we'll give you our contact information. You can reach out to Amy or myself between now and the 27th. Don't feel like you have to save your questions. We will visit with any and all board members who have questions about this process. So reach out to us tomorrow. Tonight on the drive home, we have a good 2 hour drive. You can call us. Otherwise, up until the 27th, we'll be happy to answer anything for you via email or by phone. All right, so let's get started. We're going to just start with the first page and kind of flip through here. When you look here on the table of contents, I just want to ask you to review that yellow box at the bottom, the do's and don'ts of hiring a superintendent. I want you to read through those for a moment, and I'm going to ask for volunteers to share with me what jumps out at you, either the do's or the don'ts within that box.
Don't overlook those already in the district.
And that is a don't, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly the same.
Very often there are internal candidates that are
That's
interested in the
what I
job. And we'll get to a whole section here on internal candidates and how to treat them relative to external candidates. You don't want to assume people are interested, but you should never assume that they are not. So keep your eyes wide open when you do a search.
Don't hire the best of the worst.
That's a good one.
Yeah, another way of saying don't settle. We do not want this board to settle on a candidate that's not the right fit for Kasson-Mantorville. So one of the things I'll forewarn you about is pools are smaller than they were 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm sure you can guess why. We're seeing it across all realms of education. There are fewer people willing to take on the very difficult role of being a superintendent. However, that doesn't mean that they're not outstanding candidates. When I first started about 5 years ago, we had pools that averaged 20 to 30 people per search. And I worked with Dave a long time. He remembers these large searches that we've done. That doesn't mean all 20 or 30 were great candidates. Some of them were kicking the tires to see if they would get an interview. They'd never been a superintendent and weren't sure they wanted it, but they wanted to apply. So there was some hesitancy in those larger pools, but about half of them were pretty solid. We're now seeing pools more in the range of 10 to 15 people. The vast majority of the people are extremely solid candidates. The tire kickers aren't throwing their hat in the ring anymore. So the good news is, I think even though the quantity is less, the quality has gone up. Solid people are applying for positions because they know what they're in for and they're ready for it and they want the job. So we still don't want you to settle though. If you don't find the right person, we will help you find an interim and we will do another search for free next year. So do not feel like you have to choose someone at the conclusion of the process, okay? What else in here might resonate with you?
Agree to arrive at a consensus.
Excellent point. Please try to arrive at a consensus. You do not have to, especially have a unanimous vote in the superintendent search. A majority of the board could hire the next superintendent. You certainly may do that. We'd like to see you work through any discussion of differences of who might be the best candidate and eventually arrive at a unanimous decision, but you don't have to. The reason we do encourage you to work toward that, though, is there are candidates that will not walk into a divided board. And so if it's a 4-3 or a 5-2, even a 6-1, sometimes a really strong candidate will say, what was the vote? And if we say it was 6-1, well, they'll want to think about it, and they may not take the job. That has happened. Usually they will, because they know that board turnover is a part of being a superintendent. There will be new board members during their time here in Kasson-Mantorville. There are candidates, though, that will say, if it's not unanimous, if the full board doesn't want me, then I am going to respectfully decline. So something to think about. Any other ones that you say? I'm going to point to one for just a moment. These are a lot of common sense, but the bottom one on the right, the don'ts. Don't give away the school board's right to select its next superintendent. A lot of people read that and they say, well, what does that exactly mean? What that means is that you 7 people are the hiring authority and only you 7 people. No one else gets to hire this person but the school board. It's your only employee, right? It's the only employee that you hire and you oversee and you evaluate. None of the other staff in the district, they all report to your superintendent. Superintendent reports just to you. Some boards, by trying to be extremely inclusive, invite stakeholders into the decision-making process and set those folks up with unrealistic expectations that the stakeholders will get to help you decide who to hire. So we want to be very careful when we get to the point that we're talking about stakeholder input, that we're really clear that they are in an advisory capacity only. The decision rests with you. So should you involve stakeholders in the interviews, for example, we want to ask any stakeholders who are participating in that manner to say, what are some strengths or opportunities for growth, i.e. weaknesses, of these 2 or 3 people? We do not want the stakeholders to say, please rank your choices 1 through 3. Because if all the stakeholders say that you should be hiring Jane Doe, and the board, having seen more information, you've seen applications, you've seen letters of reference, you've seen transcripts. If you choose to go with John Doe, well, then they feel cheated because you asked them who to hire and then you did not do that. So we want to be really clear on expectations with stakeholders. If you give away the right to select the superintendent, even unintentionally out of kindness or out of wanting people to feel heard, it will set you up for resentment down the road because you're the board. This is your choice and only your choice. So that one is a quagmire if you aren't real clear with people about what their role is. Okay? All right, we'll keep this, come back to it later if there's another question. Beginning the search. We're going to kind of skip page 1 because it's about the budget, it's about using a consultant, and here we are. So you're using MSBA. Congrats. Good choice, by the way. We love doing superintendent searches, and we do all of our searches from the lens of school board members. And so we are not working for candidates, we're working for the school board. And there's some things that are unique to our searches that are not done by other search firms. For instance, you will see all of the application materials. It does contain private data, so we need to be super careful and prepare you how to handle that private data so you're not violating the Government Data Practices Act. However, you will see them all, and I believe we're the only search firm in the state that lets you see everything. Usually we bring you the 4 or 5 best and let you see those and those alone, but not the whole pool. We think you should see the whole pool. So, all right, the search timeline, most searches average 3 to 4 months. When I started, they averaged about 6.5 months. Not anymore. Things have sped up because most things have gone online and there's a lot more competition for good candidates. So you no longer have the luxury of spending 6 months doing a search. However, you are starting early enough. Your planning meeting is at the end of November, which is early. You will be one of the first out of the gate. And so you will have the opportunity to make the biggest impact with your announcement that the position is open. Anyone who wants to be a superintendent or wants to be a superintendent here already knows Dr. Thompson is an interim. So word is out, and yet you are starting early enough where you will have a good 3 to 4 months and be able to garner a lot of attention for this position. So your timing is really good. All of these steps here that are outlined under month 1, 2, 3, and 4, don't worry about that because that's what our job is. This is if you wanted to do your search yourself, these are things you needed to check off, but we'll be doing these for you and keeping you in the loop, making sure that you're informed. This will not be a search that MSBA leads. That's another thing that's a little different with us, is we will make sure that all of you have the information you need to make a decision. And we'll let you know the pros and cons of that decision, and then you'll decide. But you will own this search from beginning to end, because we don't know what's best for Kasson-Mantorville, but you do. So we'll make sure that you have these things in your checkbox. We simply will not say, and here's what we think you should do. We don't want to do that. We may recommend something, and yet you entirely on your own can decide how you want to proceed at every step of the way. We just don't want you to violate the law. But if you choose to, that's on you, right? But we will make recommendations, including of candidates. We'll go through the pool and tell you who we feel is strongest, however you ultimately decide. Let's see. I don't think anything else on that page with consultants. There's some brief information about involving stakeholders at the top of page 3. We won't go through it. The most important thing is that advisory capacity. Don't give away your power as the board to hire this person. And the hiring criteria, Amy and I, when we come back at the end of November, will work through with you what's the kind of person that really fits Kasson-Mantorville. You are unique. Just because someone is a good superintendent next door doesn't mean they'll be a great superintendent here. So defining before the planning meeting, in fact, Amy will be sending you a survey to take. We have a choice of like 25 or 30.
Yeah,
Something like that.
it's in the 20s, I think.
Yep. So you'll have a chance in advance. We have some along these same lines that we want you to vote on as board members. And then at the planning meeting, you'll decide how to winnow down or how to maybe wordsmith them, some of those hiring criteria to better fit what you're looking for. Here again, let's see. Oh, here. Beginning the search, hiring criteria. The applications can be announced in a multitude of ways. All of those on the right side in bold. We have all of the postings in Minnesota on MSBA's website. Even our competition that does searches puts their stuff on our website. It's just very well viewed, as is MASA's site, the administrator's site, and EdPosa, St. Cloud State University, are the 3 biggest ones. You'll have the option at the planning meeting to talk about additional national advertising. I don't know that it's going to be necessary for your search. Some districts want to advertise in national publications at a cost, but we'll talk through the pros and cons of that. But word will get out, and again, I think it already is. Internal applicants, yes.
I was just gonna add that it will be a national search just by being posted through Revelis, which is like our online application system. And that is accessible by anybody across the country who's applying for jobs with any of our like partner states who are part of that, or part of that group. So it will be, by virtue of being through that application system, a national search.
I forgot about that. Yep. I don't know if you remember from the proposal, but NAS, National Affiliation of Superintendent Searchers, there's 40 states, I think, that school board associations do searches. We share resources and databases and references, and sometimes candidates as well. So thank you, Amy. Mm-hmm. Amy's also taking copious notes, by the way. She's already working with you on a lot of things for the planning meeting. Okay. So while I do a lot of talking, she's wanting to make sure that we're preparing for that November 27th meeting, and she'll be writing a lot of stuff while we're talking. Internal applicants, this goes back to the question I think that you asked right away. There may be internal applicants. They may be telling people that they've applied for the position of superintendent. You can't confirm that with anybody because it's private data. The names of these applicants are private data, 100%, until you name them as a finalist. So if you choose to interview someone out of the pool, let's say you have a pool of 10, and you decide to interview 5, those 5 people, their names will go public. that night that you say, these are the candidates A, B, C, that we're gonna interview A, B, and C. Well, their names are, and you read the names, or we read the names. Everybody else who applied for it, their name remains private data forever. So you as board members must be very careful when you're reviewing those applications, whether they're internal or external, that you are not sharing any application data with anybody. Don't be looking at the resumes on your laptop at the coffee shop. Someone might walk behind and see a name and go, oh, there's a school board member, they're looking at a resume for this person. I wonder if they've applied. Very important to hold those names in confidence, okay? Especially sometimes if they're an internal candidate who's telling all kinds of people that they want the job. Just because there's an internal candidate doesn't mean they're going to get an interview. You may not think that they are the right person for the fit based upon the depth of the pool. There could be 5 or 6 stronger candidates. You do, however, have to ensure that they follow the exact same application process and jump through all of the hoops that your external people do. There is no such thing as a leg up on the search if you're an internal person. So we do need to be careful that their expectations are managed. I would caution you as board members, if you know of an internal person that has their superintendent's license, because very often there's people with licenses that are administrators or teachers, you just never know. I would be careful that you don't encourage them to apply. And why do you think that is? If you know them personally and you like them, why wouldn't you encourage someone who is an administrator in your district or a teacher that has a license to apply?
Because it shows a bias?
Yeah.
It can show a bias, and they will hear something different than you intend. You intend to say, hey, you're really great. I think you should apply. They hear, a school board member tells me I should apply. Maybe I have a leg up. And their expectation is clouded because you've encouraged them very nicely to throw their hat in the ring. So we suggest that as school board members, make absolutely no promises to internal candidates. Again, resentment, if the message you're sending is different than the message that you meant, that candidate, it could really affect their sense of self and love of their job because they felt cheated, that you encouraged them and then you didn't even give them an interview. You know, that just can happen. So be careful with internal candidates and don't imply that they have any edge whatsoever. If they choose to tell people they've applied, good for them. And then if they don't get an interview, they can explain to everybody perhaps what happened. But we've seen it happen sometimes. It's not pretty. An internal person is telling everybody how excited they are and then they're not getting an interview. And you can't confirm or deny that they even applied. So, any questions so far? I feel like I'm saying a lot. We're good? All right. Please speak up if so. Screening the applications on page 5. Again, you will see all of those. We suggest on your own list, in your own way, put them in sort of a yes, no, maybe category, because we will be doing it simultaneously. We work with service providers like Dr. Thompson to go through all of these applications and to come up with those we feel best fit your hiring criteria. Those hiring criteria that you identify early on that go in the brochure, right? Those are a yardstick for you to come back to again and again and again. And one of the ways you use that yardstick is to choose your finalists, right? That's what we're doing. We're holding it up against what you've told us you want in a leader, and we're deciding who's strongest in those areas. You need to do that for yourself as well. Your choices might align with who we're recommending, or they may not. You can interview anybody you want, even if we haven't recommended them. Now, we'll come to the meeting of finalist recommendation and we'll say we're recommending candidates A, C, L, and M. You can ask us, well, why aren't you recommending candidate B? We're bound by data privacy laws also. So we can't tell you why, because it might reveal who that person is. We have to be very careful that we're not outing someone who applied for the position that we don't think fits. You can certainly ask us, but we'll be really careful what we say. But we've done our homework. We've done pre-interviews, we talked to references, we've done social media sweeps. We feel good about our recommendations. And yet, you know this district better. So you can choose folks that we haven't recommended. That's your right. Nice.
But everybody gets to see all the applicants.
All the board members do.
Right, that's what I meant.
Dr. Thompson won't, you won't, yeah, so board members will.
So they could essentially figure out the ones you aren't recommending, right?
Oh, yeah, they'll know.
Okay.
The morning of that meeting, in fact, Amy will send you a list, highly confidential list, that says the people who are highlighted are who we're recommending. And then you have some time that day to compare it to your list and go, oh yeah, hey, I match up, or, oh, I didn't think that person fit, but they're recommending them. So you have some time to compare, right?
And we do try our best to answer your questions if you are curious about why, but again, we'll just be careful about how we can explain it, but we will explain it if we can. Sometimes it's as simple as they didn't have their license, so it just depends on what the reason is, but we do our best.
And we're really careful in case there is something unpleasant when you do a social media sweep, not to tell you what that is. We'll just say that you're looking for someone with high integrity. We felt the other candidates were stronger in that area. We would not say, oh, they lost their job because they embezzled funds from the district. You just do a quick Google search, you know who we talked about. So we would have to be really careful with that. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. The other thing is when you're looking at these applications and you're using that hiring criteria to guide you, which you'll also use to craft interview questions. Well, we will interview questions for you. Be careful that you don't fall in love with someone on paper. Some people are really good on paper and then not as good in person, or their reference checks have proven that they're not as kind and inclusive as they say they are. Paper resumes and application materials are a good indicator, but do not get your heart set on someone. You have 2 rounds of interviews to go through to decide who is best. And so we'll just caution people that sometimes there's people who just knock your socks off and you found your next superintendent. And then you interview them and you kind of wonder, or talk to a reference and you wonder again. So don't fall in love with the resumes. We will encourage you on the 27th to put something about salary in your vacancy brochure, but again, you don't have to. Generally speaking, I think candidates like to know a number or something like that. So you have a couple of options. You can put a range, you can put no less than, you could put the current superintendent's contract for 23-24, or you could just put based on qualifications alone and leave it very generic, and that's fine too. We have several options. We have
4 options we'll bring along to that planning meeting for you to read through, and you can use one of those or you can create your own, but we just have some recommended options for you to pick to put in there.
But numbers do speak, and it's not necessarily guaranteeing anyone a number, because you're going to have a big difference in salary from someone who's a sitting superintendent and has been for 10 years and someone new to the position. Just the experience level is going to modify that. So you'll work through that at the planning meeting. But people, I think, sometimes we get asked, well, what do people look for in a job? And we don't know everyone, of course, because there are a lot of possible candidates out there. But generally speaking, location is really important to candidates. You have a really nice location in Kasson-Mantorville. The southeast Minnesota area does generate more interest than far northwestern Minnesota does. So location's great. Reputation of the district is something that people look for because administrators talk. This is a pretty small community of school administrators, so people do know how relationships between the board and the superintendent have been previously. And the third is usually money. And we want people to be realistic, because we want people coming in to know what it might be, so that you don't come to negotiations and you're $45,000 apart on a base salary. That's disappointing for everybody. It's like, I can't afford to leave my current job because you're offering me less than that. So money is something you need to talk about up front, and we'll do that with you in the planning meeting.
And we'll bring along some comparable district information for you too, so that you can kind of look at, just so that you have an idea of what some of the other districts have.
Including the whole compensation package, not
Yes.
just their base salary, because
Correct.
benefits, as you know, are such a huge part of it. We'll bring this along for you too. Media can be a real asset to a search, and it can also be a real challenge for a search. So here in Kasson-Mantorville, what do you have for media sources? And who would cover this? Is there a local paper? Is there a radio?
A
Is there?
local paper, but they haven't been regulars at board meetings.
Okay.
So
Does it cover both communities, Kasson and Mantorville? What's the name of the paper?
Dodge County Independent, it's a weekly publication.
Okay. Okay. And we'll put together press releases that we'll share, and then the press release you can modify it with whatever your normal protocols are for press releases, but we'll do all of that work, and then just send it out right away to the newspaper, because they can pretty much put news release in the paper. They don't have to actually report on it and write that kind of stuff, but the press releases keep people informed, because information is crucial in any kind of speech.
I send those out as the communications director,
Okay.
and I'll hit the local news stations as well.
TV?
TV, yeah.
Okay.
And then, the big paper in Rochester as well.
Oh.
And then all of our social media, Instagram, Facebook, and X.
Awesome. Good job. You got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'll tell you right now, you have a huge asset then, Carmen, because a lot of times it falls upon a superintendent to send out press releases. But if there's a communications flow already underway, that's great, because you can keep people informed and current, and it's accurate as well. So
We suggest you also put it on your website, have a search section on your website.
yeah, landing page of some type. Email have to figure out. We got
Yeah.
samples of some if you want.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, wonderful. So the media can be a really good, good friend to you throughout this process, because the one thing that really can derail a search is toxic misinformation. Change makes people nervous. Change in leadership makes people nervous. And so the more transparent you can be, the better. And the more accurate that is, it's just like stick to the facts, so that rumors don't start swirling about the superintendent search and who and what and where and why and that kind of thing. We'll also be doing a Q&A session for you, which is something that's proprietary to MSBA, where we invite questions from people ahead of time that we can answer in a recorded live session. And then we put the website, give the recording to you to put on the website. So that we walk people through the timeline, we walk them through the brochure, we walk through the stakeholder survey, and we talk about what's happening and when and why, to make sure people can refer to that Q&A session. It's usually about half an hour.
Yeah.
About. So it's available for folks that have questions about the search process. And that way you, as board members, when someone runs into you at the grocery store or the gas station and they ask you a question and you just don't know immediately, because there's a lot to this, you could say, hey, go watch the Q&A on the website. And that's the easiest thing to do.
And we share contact information on there so that they can also then reach out to us if they have additional questions, so that they're not bogging you down with questions. So,
yep, absolutely. One of the number one things with the media is, you'll notice here, number one, to appoint a designated spokesperson. We want a unified message throughout the search process. Now, you obviously can disagree at the board table about candidates and interview questions and all that sort of thing. In the media, we would like the board to speak with one voice. That again looks good for candidates. So it's almost always the board chair is speaking for the board if asked for a quote. And I'm pretty sure Rochester will probably ask you for a quote at some point in the post bulletin might. So we would recommend the board chair, but you can think about it before the planning meeting, so that one person is speaking to the media. And then if there are, I heard you say a lot about social media, if there are posts about the search that are going out based on those press releases, we would suggest you share the district's post so that it's accurate and it's been vetted for information. And that's what you put out as individual board members. It's a lot of work to create your own posts about everything, other than, hey, I'm excited about the search, or hey, come to the interviews tomorrow night, that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, we like you to share the official line of the district, because we know it's accurate. I'm saying accurate a lot. It helps, trust me, because if it's not, you're gonna get caught in some drama, and we don't want drama around the search. So anything on the media besides that? All right, page 7, I'm not gonna go through, but this is something that you could use if you want when you're looking at those applications and putting them into yes, no, maybe piles. You could choose to go through this much work. Some board members do, most board members use their kind of gut instinct about, hey, I like this one. I like the answers to these questions. Good experience. Yes. Without having to necessarily use a rubric like this, you certainly may do whatever really fits your own personal style. We have something similar that we use with our service providers. So, all right, I'm going to jump ahead to the interview.
Quick question, and
Yes.
this might be jumping the gun. So when we have narrowed down to a pool of of candidates or finalists that we're gonna be interviewing. Do they come to you, do we need to be able to give you feedback to give them if they ask for it, the ones who weren't asked or selected to be interviewed? Like if they are, can you give me some feedback as to maybe why not, or do we need to be able to provide that, like by doing something this might be more helpful, or?
You certainly don't have to. We usually know why they have not been invited to interview. And we do a lot of coaching of applicants. I know Dr. Thompson does as well in his other life as a mentor. So we are more than happy to offer feedback because we will obviously understand the vetting process. We've seen you deliberate candidates A, B, and C and through you. We've seen their materials. And if they ask us for feedback, we can give that to them.
Perfect.
Take the pressure off of your shoulders. You should not try to do that because that puts you in a really rough spot, especially if you know people. So you can let us do that for you if you are comfortable with that. Okay. Let's see, the interview. So there are two things that drive every search. One is the open meeting law. Every step of the process must be done in an open session. You may not close a meeting for the superintendent search. The only time you can close a meeting relative to your superintendent is for superintendent evaluation, or if you have personnel issues that are significant enough that you want your attorney involved. So evaluations, you can close sessions, but in search, no. Everything is done in the open, and that includes the interview. At the same time, the second thing driving this is the Government Data Practices Act here in Minnesota. And we already talked about the fact that the names of these applicants are private data forever unless they are asked to be a finalist. Then it goes public. Even if they just turn you down, sometimes you choose your 6 people or 5, you name them that night. Amy gets on the phone and calls them and says, hey, congratulations, Kasson-Mantorville wants to interview. Ooh, I changed my mind. Okay, are you sure? Your name has already gone public. So they know that going into it. But the Data Practices Act and the Open Meeting Law will drive this. And even your deliberations, and this is when it gets sticky, and Amy will walk you through during training how to talk about private data in a public meeting. You will talk about candidate A, candidate B, candidate C. You just got to be very careful that you're not identifying them. You can't say, well, when she was in Minneapolis, 1, gender, 2, district, Minneapolis. As a principal, 3, position. Anyone can figure out who you're talking about if you share that information. So Amy will help you get through how to do that, but you must do it in an open meeting, including these interviews. So we'll want the rooms big enough for people to come in and watch the interview with the candidates.
So we'll be in a different room, not this one, for that.
Okay.
November 27th planning, is that need to be open and
Yes.
posted? Okay.
Yes, yep, that's an open meeting. And we have a list of postings that we can send you. Got that one? Yep. So we have, they're all special meetings. Usually it's not piggybacked on a regular meeting because it's superintendent search meetings can take an hour or 2 or longer. So special meetings, we'll send you all of them. You can customize for PM. Okay? All right. All of this, I'm not going to tell you a lot about it because this is what we do for you now that you've hired MSBA. It's really important that, one, you be here. The full board should do this. This is not a job for a subcommittee ever. Any part of the search process should not be delegated to a subcommittee. It is the full board. So we'll do all of this stuff about planning the interviews. We'll create questions that align with your hiring criteria. I don't know how many questions we have these days.
A lot.
Hundreds.
Hundreds of questions.
Hundreds of questions.
So we'll narrow it down and pull it to fit your hiring criteria, but you guys will select which of those actual questions will be asked in the interview. We want to make sure you're getting your questions answered. So we'll just kind of narrow it down and then you can tweak them and change them. You can reword them. And if you feel like there's something that is missing, you can add. So we're just trying to help you with the process and assist you along with it. So, yeah.
And that brings up an interesting point is Amy will have recommended questions for you. Under this hiring criteria, here's 2, 3, or 4 that might fit, and under this hiring criteria. We don't want you reading those questions aloud in an open meeting because you want the best candidate to be hired, not the best prepared candidate. So if the questions are leaked before the interviews, you may have someone come in and just knock your socks off, and it's because they know what the questions are. But you'll talk that through because some boards, I've had one board that say, we want the questions public in advance. We want everyone to come in very prepared. So they sent every candidate the questions. Most boards want to see how they think on their feet. you'll think about that. But if it is questions that you want to see how they answer on their feet, be very careful in that meeting, not to say, well, I think this should be reworded and then read it out loud 2 or 3 times and people are taking notes and it's just not a level playing field if some people know the questions and some don't. Okay? A lot of this is common sense. So the screening of applications, you're doing it while we're doing it, and Amy will bring a proposed timeline to that meeting on the 27th with lots of different choices so that it's not, how about you do your interviews on February 7th? I mean, she's gonna have a bunch, and then you pick based on your schedules and availability. But round 1, we might recommend between 4 to 6 people. Round 2, probably 2 or 3. You can do whatever you want. We've had boards interview 8 people in that first round. And I know Ken has been through a search before. Interviews are exhausting. The first 2 or 3 are fun. And then you just really have to pay attention because they start to blur together. So we recommend not more than 6, but you certainly can do what you like. If the pool is sort of shallow, but there's 3 or 4 super strong people, we will only recommend perhaps those 3 or 4. We're not going to pad the pool just to give you more people to hear from. If they're not as good as the others, we don't want you to spend your time or theirs interviewing them unless they really have a shot at this job. So to be determined on how many people will be in your interview. The considerations, you can read those bullet points, but there's a couple down there. Use the same interview questions for all candidates and ask them in the same order. That's really important. And I came from private sector and then the nonprofit world. And when I would interview prospective employees, I'd ask all kinds of questions. I had 5 or 6 questions I wanted to ask, but we'd go off on tangents about all kinds of stuff so I could really get to know them, Not how we want you to do it in the public sector. Taxpayer dollars are paying for this position, so you want to ensure that level playing field. So you ask the same questions of every candidate and you don't go off on tangents because not everyone has a chance to answer that tangent question. Does that make sense? Are any of you by any chance working in a public sector job where you do this already? Sometimes we have board members that at the county level or the state level, they're like, oh yeah, right, you gotta do the same thing for everybody. Okay. We'll talk more about that when the time comes as well. And they will be asking you questions. During interview training, Amy will walk you through how to handle that, but candidates are getting more and more savvy at asking the board because they are interviewing you as you are interviewing them. So there's always room at the end of the interview. What questions do you have for us? They're asking some really good questions. So you want to prepare. How will you respond to those? They might be in some areas, and there's some standard ones, I guess, but you want to think that through just so you don't misstep and lose a really good candidate because someone goes rogue and provides an answer that candidate's like, okay, thank you, but no. We'll talk through that with you as well. And the last one on here is important, to take good notes. However, your notes during the search are subject to a potential data request. So please make sure that your notes are professional and appropriate. And you are not writing down things that if a data request comes through might touch on data, protected categories. Yeah, discrimination. So you don't want to write down things about their age or their gender or their ethnicity, because all of those are protected categories, which Amy will work you through on training as well. But board notes should be turned in at the end of the search to your HR person, and they'll be kept in accordance with data retention policies. They'll be different depending upon if they simply applied or if they were interviewed or if they were hired. You keep them longer if they were hired, but HR stuff, is anyone an HR person here?
No, she's not here.
Okay, but that person will know what to do with your board notes in accordance with all of the policies and procedures that are necessary. Any questions on interviews? I kind of went quickly through that too. Okay, easy crowd. Let's see, I'm not going to spend time on questions because there's a bunch in here that we provide you in case you aren't working with us. You may find some in here that you love, but also in the interview training process, Amy goes through, I think we're sitting at about 178 questions in that one, so you'll have a bunch more to look at. You don't have to look at any of these because Amy will do a really good job of giving you the best ones that we think pull out of people the information you're looking for. But there's questions in here if you want to read through them. You can certainly use any and all of those when the time comes. So I did mention, yes.
Question. Do you recommend having candidates at some point take a tour of the facility, the building? How does that work?
Great question. Great question. Yes, we do. It's usually in conjunction with round 2, when you're down to 2 or 3 people. We like to see 3 people in the final round because sometimes someone drops out. And if you have 2 people in the final round and they drop out, you're left with 1 person to interview. So we suggest 3. That way, if someone drops out, you still have 2. But those 3 people or 2 people want tours of the district. And they want to ask questions of administrators as they're on the tours. And they want to see the facilities. And you have some rocking facilities here. Beautiful. They'll want to see that. And they'll want to get to know the district as well, because they have questions. And it's usually in conjunction with that second round before their interview. So maybe from 11 in the morning till 3, they're on a tour with someone. We'll talk to the hosts and whatever, but then after that, they have an interview with the board. So everyone's kind of doing the round robin. The tours are running simultaneously. But yes, they will want to see the boards. That was tricky during COVID because everything went online. And no one had met in person before they hired a superintendent, and none of them had gotten a tour of the buildings because buildings were shut down. So it created some, what word would be, uneasiness about when I walk into my new job and I'm gonna actually have an office eventually, what it'll be like. So it's great now, we're past that point. So, yeah, tours are a great idea.
Well, I think as a board, we understand that it's critical that we show the district in the best light and the community.
Mhm.
And we want every candidate to want to be here. We don't want to lose a candidate because we want their best.
Yep.
So
Put your best foot forward.
Have you had school boards invite the candidate along with their family or any children that might be coming to the district?
No, they still may do that. The reason that we don't encourage that is because you have to make your decision for this district based on, remember I talked about we want to make sure it stays legal? So we want you to make your decision based on who is the best person for this job, based on their professional qualifications. We don't want you to be swayed because they've got really cute kids. Or you happen to really like their spouse. You know, we don't encourage you to take them out for dinner, for example, where you meet their spouse. Because what if they don't have a spouse? Or what if they have a partner? I mean, you just don't want to invite bias into the interview process by inviting families to come. They may not have a family. They may have a non-traditional family. And if they're being weighed on that in any way, shape, or form, and you don't hire them, they have cause to say, you didn't hire me because, and they could have something awkward around their family that was a red flag for a board. So we don't want you doing that. But again, you're the board, this is your search. We'll make that call. Many do though. A spouse will come with and watch the interview and they'll ask, can the spouse come on a tour? And we can't say, no, they can't, obviously, because this is an open meeting, anyone can sit and watch. And they sometimes want to see the, especially if they're moving, relocating, they want to see the community, look at houses, ask questions. It's just one of those very careful, be careful how you handle that.
So Barb, that brings another question. What about moving to the community and being a part of the community? How is that handled? How's that discussion?
You want to handle it? It's a great question. We ask that a lot. We do.
So there's no requirement for superintendents to have residency. So you can't ask them if they're gonna move here. You can't weigh any of your decisions upon that. So it can't even be brought up, unfortunately, because I understand, like, you want your superintendent to live there and be a part of the community, but it's not a requirement for a superintendent to have residency, unfortunately. I say unfortunately, because I understand that, you know. There are, however, you know, depending on what your hiring criteria is, you know, if visibility and accessibility is one of those, they will need to show during their superintendency that they are visible and accessible. And, you know, you can include that in their evaluation process. So there are ways to hold somebody accountable to what you're looking for in a superintendent, but it's not a requirement. You can't require that your superintendent live here. Do you have anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, it's everyone wants the superintendent in the district boundaries. And they want their kids to go to school here and that kind of thing, if they have kids, right? You can't ask about it because it could turn out that you hire someone that has kids that did. I mean, we had a candidate that's pretty savvy. smaller districts, this candidate had like 8 kids. And as part of the interview, they know you can't ask about that. So they said, well, one of the reasons I'm so excited to come here is I'm bringing 8 kids between kindergarten and 9th grade here. And I'm going to enroll every single one of them in this district. They shouldn't have said that because you can't consider that. They're trying to buy your vote, right? But they did it. We can't tell them what they can't say. But every once in a while, you'll have a candidate say, okay, I know you can't ask these things about me. I'm just going to tell you, I'm married. My husband's a college professor working here. We have 3 kids. We're going to move to this town. Our advice to you is nod politely and then ignore it. Strike that from the record. You can't guarantee that they'll follow up on that promise. In fact, we had someone get hired that was going to move to the community and they never did. They commuted. And the board was very upset because they felt like this person had said, I'll move here if you hire me. Well, it's not contractually something you can put in the contract, or you can't put it in your, it's not in statute, so it's a tricky wicket.
And be careful not to, Barb had touched on your notes. So if they do say that in their interview, don't write that in your notes because you can't consider it. And just to protect you, because your notes are subject to data request, you can't include that type of things in your notes or when you're considering the candidates. So.
That makes sense? Okay. Any other questions?
And we'll go through all this again as well. Like as we go through step by step, I'll send these, I'll go over these with you so that you're reminded. You don't have to remember every detail we tell you guys tonight. We'll work with you through the whole process so that you know step by step. So
this whole great big red don't ask is important because this is the protected categories list. So don't ask about them, don't consider these things. I mentioned age, ethnicity, all of those things in here, gender. None of this can be considered for your position of superintendent. So don't ask about it, don't consider it, and if they mention it, don't write it down. Thank you. Remember to say that. Okay. In fact, at the very top, if a candidate volunteers information about a protected category during the interviews, you should do the following: ignore it, don't ask follow-up questions, don't discuss it, make sure it doesn't become a factor in your hiring decision. Okay. All right. Let's see. There's a lot more to this. When the time comes, when Amy starts helping you with interview questions and such, there's some options that you can take a look at. The candidate's turn on page 13 is a very high-level overview of what they might ask you. And we do want you to be prepared to speak up, because one of the things that we really like to see at the end of the interview, the candidate should leave enough time to ask you. They'll know, for instance, Amy will say, hey, the board has 14 questions for you. You have 1 hour. And the last question is, do you have questions for us? And hold up signs saying 30 minutes left, 15 minutes left. So if they have good time management, they'll leave a good 10 minutes at the end for questions of you. What we want to see boards do is answer those questions and build upon one another's answers to show that you work well together and that you all have a lot of passion and you care deeply about this district. Sometimes the candidate will ask a question, the board chair usually fields the questions, and the board chair says, well, who would like to answer that? And there's just crickets. That's not a good look, is it? So the board chair might say, well, I'll answer that one, and then it happens again, and the board chair is the only one answering. That candidate is going to get a weird feeling in their gut that the board doesn't play well together because they want you all to have input. So please share input during their questioning of you. And you may not know answers to all of this. You know, maybe 1 or 2 of you have a passion for the strategic plan, or technology in the schools, or early education. You know, whatever it might be that is sort of your love, you might want to be sure you speak to that when they ask you questions. Okay, it's a good chance for you to get to know each other. This Q&A time with that candidate is when it can be more conversational, because you are asking the same questions in the same order without follow-up questions. This is when they can get to know you better, and you can offer information, and you might have a better dialogue about who they are, and they want to get to know who you are. Okay? So just think about some of those things, but you never know what they're going to ask. We've had some doozies asked lately from some really savvy candidates wanting to find the best fit for them and maybe their family. But interview mistakes. I don't like talking about mistakes, but I will tell you there's a couple on here that are really important. Number 1, we already talked about. Do not have incomplete notes. You need to try to remember these people. If you do interview 6, we might suggest you do it on 2 days, 3 one night and 3 the next night, You can do all 6 in one day, depending on your schedules and availability. It's a lot though, but you will be amazed by the time the 4th person's interviewing, you're like, I'll answer that question. You can't remember who said it. So you gotta take good notes. Okay, so you remember who they are. The don't ask list, we talked about that. Number 8, please don't make a bad impression. A good candidate might have several choices and depends on what else is open at the same time that your search is open. And again, you're early, which is great. That's good. That's a good, you won't be at the tail end of search season where there's fewer candidates they haven't committed to a district. So good impressions are important. And that number 9, accepting the wrong fit. I think one of the first ones you guys noted was don't settle. We continue to say that throughout, just don't settle. Keeping in mind though that nobody's perfect. Candidates will have different strengths to bring to this district. You just have to prioritize which candidate best fits what you're looking for without expecting perfection from the superintendent. That's impossible to live up to. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. Anything on the interview mistakes? I know they show 10 of them, but I'm not going to touch on every single one. You can read this before bed when you get tired some nights. Yeah.
So, let's just say they would ask a question and I say, do any board members want to field this one, or do you want me to take this one next? Or if I need to refer to a board member, what's the proper way to do that in an interview? By board member Madiri or by Patrick, or I just want to make sure.
I think it's totally district specific. We've had boards that authentically operate informally and use first names. And then we've had boards that operate very formally, even some really small districts, much smaller than KM, go by Chair Kaufman, Director, I can't see last names, Director Madiri, is that how you say it? They do that as a matter of course. And so I would say do what's authentic to your regular meetings. And that's how you should interview them so that they know the kind of board you are. Does that make sense? There's no wrong way to do it other than pretending to be something you're not. If you're a very informal board, call one another by your first names, or you're a point of order board with a lot of formality, do you, so they know who you are when they're interviewing, right? That's a great question, thank you. Interview summary form, I'm not gonna worry about that because we have one that we'll suggest you use. The checking of references. We encourage you between round 1 and round 2 to make a couple of reference check calls. A board member, someone might volunteer to do that. We will have done reference checking during the vetting process already. Our service providers have made phone calls to references to really find out who this person is, right? After round 1 though, you went out down to 2 or 3 people. We would like someone on the board to make some phone calls to find out if the person is who you think they are. And I say that because as board members, when you make phone calls, a fellow board member, for example, might share something with you that they wouldn't share with MSBA because you're a peer or they know you. And so you can call, if we'd like one person to do it, maybe 2 at the most, and have it be a consistent process. Amy will teach you how to do all of that. But we just want you to do some due diligence on your own before round 2, because it will confirm what you probably already know, is that they're outstanding, they are who they say they are, they got a great reputation. And yet you might uncover something that no one would tell us because they're more comfortable with you as a board member than the search firm, right? So consider that, and if you're someone who loves to do reference checking, you may want to volunteer for this when the time comes.
I have a question about that. So, because a situation had come up where if a candidate is applying in another district and someone reaches out to us as a board member, and they may not have been in the superintendent role, but may have been in a different role, are we even allowed to give information?
You are allowed to do anything you want within reason.
Is that best practice? Is that?
Boy, that's a really good question, Amy. Thank you for asking that.
I liked your answer.
It depends. I don't know if you ever watched Terry Morrow present a lot of stuff in our office. Terry's, as an attorney, his favorite phrase is, it depends. Whatever a reasonable person, he does the whole reasonable person can ascertain from your answer is okay, right? Well, what's a reasonable person? I mean, they want to find out from you really truly, is this person as good as they say they are? Is there something, you know, the question that's pretty safe to ask or answer is, would you hire them again? And you can just say no. Don't go into detail, be done. Would you hire him again? Yes. And then maybe you want to add some wonderful things.
So in the past, I've just deferred to the board chair.
You could do that too. Yeah, you absolutely could do that. And when someone in HR is called, what does HR do? What do they provide? We call for a reference.
Dates of employment.
Uh-huh. That's about it, right? You have more freedom than that. You're not in an official capacity as an HR person in the district. So I say trust your gut, grow up on something like that.
And I'll walk you through like how to report back on what you learn, because obviously you'll be reporting back in a public meeting. And so you also have to be careful about what you share and how you share it. And I'll walk you through that too, whoever ends up doing the reference check, so that you're prepared to handle that and do it appropriately, so.
Absolutely. All right, reference check forms, we'll go through that with you. Making your choice on page 18. It mentions site visits on this page. I just put a big X through it. I've been doing this almost 5 years and I've not seen one school board do a site visit in that time. Back in the day, maybe 12 years ago when you last did the search, site visits were common because you had 6 months to do it and things weren't sped up like they are now. You don't need to go to a district of a candidate and ask about them because you can learn so much more online nowadays. And you can learn from social media and from phone calls, everything that you might learn in a site visit. So I wouldn't worry about doing that. But if you flip to the next page, 19 is irrelevant too, in my opinion. If you want to do a site visit, you can do that. We'll help you set those up. Page 20, deliberating in public. You are talking about people's careers and their interviews in a public meeting. Anything you say will probably get back to them. Do you live stream your meetings ever or record them?
Our teaching reps.
Okay. We would, you don't have to. You're meeting the open meeting law by having the doors open to the interview room, right? We will recommend to you that you not live stream the interviews. And the reason for that is to make sure it's fair to everyone. If you do live stream the interviews, candidate 3 or 4 can watch candidate 1 and know what the questions are and come in real prepared.
So can we stop anyone else from doing it?
No.
I don't think so.
Nope. If you want the best person though, we recommend people don't do that. Can't stop people from doing it, however. So that's just something that you want to have to deal with as time comes. And then recording, sometimes people will say, well, we'll record it and then we'll put their interviews on the website. Well, you don't have to do that either. And candidates, for some very good reasons, detest that because they may be really, really nervous in that interview, or they may have said something that they regret. I mean, we interview for jobs and it's usually in private behind closed doors, right? This is out there. And if a candidate says something that's not very eloquent or they stumbled over trying to explain something, they really don't want it broadcast to the world forever. So if you feel that that's important to do, we would suggest leaving it up for a week or 2 and then as a courtesy, pull it off so that it doesn't live in infamy forever for that candidate. But really all you have to do is leave the doors open so people can come in and watch the interviews. So, but you'll be talking about them in public also. And that this is a big part of the training you'll go through with Amy is to keep the comments positive. If you interview 6 people, you'll have some rise to the top that you just know in your gut you want to bring back for round 2. You just know it. You could say it very nicely in terms of, I really liked Jim and Sandy and Sue. You don't have to say, I really didn't like Randy, because then you'll have to sort of expound on why you didn't like Randy. And cutting anyone down in public is unnecessary and it's hurtful. So you have to try to deliberate positively even when people disappoint you. If you really expected more from someone, you don't have to say that out loud. Talk well about people because that's how you would hope they treat you in a public forum as well. We had someone watch a deliberation once because they were live streaming deliberation, right? And one of the board members was a little too blunt and that candidate got offered the job and they didn't take it. It's not necessary and you might lose some really good people. Just speak in your mind, right? So it's one of those things that we'll talk through a lot of how to deliberate in public and make it positive for everybody. And we won't run the interviews. Your chair will run the interviews, but we'll be there to help you and write outlines and scripts and lots of stuff for you. So Questions on this, deliberating in public, the do's and don'ts, et cetera? Okay. Employment contract, we will provide you the model contract, the MSBA, MASA model contract that both associations agree on. We're having another meeting, in fact, this week to have this year's model contract finalized. Every once in a while, there's some legislative changes that one association wants in there. We'll give that to you as a model if you'd like to use it as a template, but you don't have to. You could use your own or the one we've been using here for a long time. But we do not negotiate the contract for you. That's something we feel the school board needs to do. We won't, just an FYI. But you should have a contract, clearly. And in that contract, you'll see when you see ours that we recommend at least an annual conversation about expectations and evaluation. It's not required by state statute to evaluate your superintendent, but we think it's really important to talk about it so you can all be moving in a forward direction and frustrations aren't building over performance issues. But, that's in our contract. We'll get that to you. And you can use it as you see fit. The rest in here are appendixes, where if you were doing the search yourself, you could use these, but you don't need to because we'll be doing the search and handling all the communications with the candidates. The last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll open it up to any other questions again. The last thing I want to talk about is something you'll decide upon at the planning meeting, which is the role of the current superintendent. I know Dr. Thompson, so I can talk about him here. Okay. Our recommendation is that they not be involved in the search. However, they are your biggest ambassador for candidates that might be interested in the opportunity, and they're a cheerleader. So they know this, especially with the experience Dr. Thompson has. He knows the strengths of this district. So applicants can call Amy, her name will be on the brochure, with questions. They can email her. She'll know a lot more about this district than I will within probably a month. So she'll answer questions. They can also call Dr. Thompson and talk to him, and he can share his impressions. We would recommend it stops at that, though, and he not be a part of the vetting process. He not recommend candidates to any of you. He not even attend the search meetings, because you as a board will need to be operating without him as of next July. So we want you to work as a board without your administrator helping you too much.
He could potentially be somebody who does building tours, you know, or meets with, you know, helps in that process when we get to that, because you as board members won't be doing those tours, you know, or being a part of that. You'll be ready for interviews or getting ready for an interview or in the interview. So he might help with some of that, but yeah, that would be the other stuff.
So then, on that note, what's my role?
You're the point person.
We can also talk about
I attend, facilitate, and just listen.
You can. And
And you can always answer that later. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, no, you'll be getting lots of emails from me.
That's good.
But you'll help with some of the communication pieces as well, but there's a lot of it, but like I'll just be sending to the board, and so you won't even have all of the information as well. And so, but you can participate to a point, because this is the board decision, and we want the board to be, like, they're the hiring authority. So sometimes the district contact person doesn't even come to the board table during the search, but you're welcome to. That's kind of up to the board and what you guys want, so.
Good.
we do not want to make your job any harder than it already is. If you
It's okay, I'm invested in the next one. Work me.
Sometimes the internal contact person gets dumped on with a lot of work.
Yeah.
And they have another job, a couple of jobs. So our job as a search firm is to do that work for them and just say, hey, here's a link to the Q&A session, it needs to go on the website. Can you log that on there? Hey, can you set up listening sessions on these certain dates if we need it? That kind of stuff would be coordinated through you, but otherwise, no, it's just these folks and Amy can run the whole show. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yep.
It'll be mostly communication things, like getting the stakeholder information out about the stakeholder survey.
Yep.
So, and we'll give you, like, you can email this word for word, or you edit it to fit your district, you know, so it's less work, but just lots of events.
And what do you think about, at this point, you don't even necessarily have to come tonight, but I appreciate you being here because you do know some things about the district I don't at this point. But are you okay with, at this point, the board saying, okay, Dave, we appreciate all your help. We got this from here, or do you want to be more involved?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Are you all okay
I'm
with that?
here, I'm here, they know I'm here.
So they can reach out about the search to you if they have questions, and you may say, hey, call Amy. Because you have your plate full right now too, as superintendent.
And I do very much appreciate your experiences and your role these past 10, 15 years and how you've navigated and helped others navigate too. So I trust that if we ask you a question and you refer us, that that's the best way to handle or the best place to get the information from.
That's all we have to speak about tonight, unless you have more questions for us. Was this helpful to kind of get your feet wet about what to expect with the search? Okay, definitely.
I'm sorry, remind me, at the 27th meeting is when we'll start setting more dates, correct? Not tonight. Okay, thank you.
A little, like a few days before that meeting, I'll send you guys a planning meeting packet, and that'll have like, one of the items in there is like a potential timeline, and it'll have highlighted meetings where we need to set those dates for those things. And so it'll have like proposed dates, and then we just ask that you bring your calendars to the planning meeting so that we can set those dates, because obviously we want everybody to be able to attend all of the meetings. So we'll do that in detail at that meeting.
Already making my job easier.
That's the plan.
And we really love doing superintendent search because leadership is so incredibly important. Whoops. And so we get to help facilitate the board selecting someone that really fits the vision of where you want this district to go. So it's an honor to help you with it. We know that already. And there are times where it's going to feel like a lot of meetings. It will be so well worth it. And we want you to speak up and share with us, either individually with Amy or myself, or as a group, questions, concerns, things you've heard in the community that people want to know about the whole way through, from beginning to end with this process. Okay?
And we will take phone calls and text messages at any time, like
Even
literally.
weekends.
So don't hesitate. If you have any questions, we want to answer them. So please don't hesitate to reach out when you do have one.
Barb, Amy, anything that we as a board should or can be doing to make this process smoother or to attract a great candidate?
Great question.
That is a good question.
Maybe,
Any idea?
I don't know, maybe I should. I know that we have yet to set up our next, working as a board. We started with that initial session, and that was very beneficial, I think, and we all agreed to see it through, so that would help probably.
One of the things we hear, because we survey all of our boards after searches, and you get one too if you have 5 minutes to fill out a survey. What we hear from folks is that if everyone on the board is present and participating every step of the way, by the time you're done, you just went through about a 3 or 3.5, 4 month team building exercise. You know, you're working together toward a common goal. You're arriving at consensus, hopefully unanimous decision, not required. And so I think a continuation of the workshop about working together will be this exercise of, we need to find a great leader for our community and for our students. And we have to work together to do it. And we don't want to be divided on it. So how can we do that? So you've got this beacon out there about where you want to go. And by the time it's all done, most boards feel really good about having worked together towards something like that. And it hasn't always been easy. I mean, we've had some board challenges in searches the last couple of years where there's just very different opinions. And that actually is healthy because we're getting those different perspectives and different voices at the table. In the end, though, you all want what's best for the kids in this district. And so when you're finished, sometimes it's like, wow, we did really good because we came together and we built something pretty cool. I would say just keep in mind that's the end goal. But between now and the planning meeting, I don't think there's much you could do as far as.
No, I don't think there's
Logistical
anything that you need to do to prepare for anything. The only thing would be is when I send you information before meetings to just, usually I'll send you, here's the key things to look at. So you don't even have to look through everything ahead of time. And like, for example, when we do interview training, it's a very lengthy packet that you get. I say right in there, you don't need to look at any of this ahead of time. I just want to provide it to you ahead of time. So you don't have to look at any of it. Sometimes I'll let you know, like, you can view this ahead of time. If there's something I really need you to look at and be prepared for, I'll say it in the email body so that you know what to do. And then that's all I will ask of you is to do those things so that we can move forward and keep your meetings as efficient and so that I can respect your time and you are all respecting each other's time, so.
How about the hiring criteria? Has that survey gone out yet?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
We will send you a hiring criteria link that you will take the time to determine we'll ask you to pick like your top 6 things out of all of the options. So take your time and really consider that and what you really think is most important to the district. And that'll kind of, I'll end up taking that information and putting that in the vacancy brochure. And then we'll have that at the planning meeting. And so we can talk about it. If there's anything you want to change in the wording, just to make sure that it does fit your district the best that we can, so that you're looking for the right fit for your community.
We have talked about, as a group, we have talked about how important it is to work as a team.
Yeah.
And how important it is to work as a team to hire the right superintendent. Because that's the most important job that this board has.
Absolutely.
Is to hire the next superintendent. So it's very, very important. I understand that.
Great. This is actually a very exciting time for people. Some people, we have to do a superintendent search, or you don't know what's going to happen, so you're nervous about superintendent search. This is a great process, and the outcome is almost always great. I can't say always because nothing's perfect, right? We just really enjoy the opportunity to find with you the best person to move you forward down there. So we'll see you in 3 weeks. I know that. Yeah. Any other questions before we head out? This will make your planning meeting go really quick because so much of what I said, and I apologize if I talk so much, but it's a big part of the planning meeting is explaining these things. Now you already know it. You can look back at this and let us know if you have any questions too. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll all be impressed.
Do they have some contact information? Is that-
Oh, yeah. Jot down our phone numbers if you would. Why don't you give those
Okay,
first?
Amy Jordan, and it's 507-479-9984. Are you still live streaming that? Just kidding. I don't care because it goes on, it goes on our Q&A as well. So we want the community to call if they have questions about the process.
What is the number?
507-479-9984. And my email is ajordan@mnmsba.org.
And then my number, you're welcome to call, but you'll call me less often, is 507-508-5501. So 507-508-5501. And my email is bdorn, bdorn@mnmsba.org. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I wasn't sure you'd want it live streamed, so thanks for
Oh,
clarifying.
it's fine.
Anytime.
It'll end up on your website in the Q&A, so.
Anything else for us or other meeting business you have here?
Not tonight, thank you for your time,
Yeah.
and driving over and driving back. We'll try and keep the snow away when we come next time.
Please.
Mark
It's
will
the
do that.
season.
I'm on top.
Okay.
I'll come get you on a snowmobile if I have to.
You have been straight up before.
Well, there's a hotel in town, so
Perfect.
worst case scenario.
Perfect.
We just have 2 informational items then for tonight. The next regular school board meeting, 7 p.m. Monday, November 20th at the Forum Room. And the next special school board meeting is 6 p.m. Monday, December 4th in the district office boardroom. That's this one. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thanks, Andy. And a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Kate. Anything before we adjourn? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Any other questions? Oh,
That's one I'm also.
I have to present the rest of the city council, and I will present them before.
We'll see what's on the agenda. That can usually vary, but so we'll see what's.
I was gonna suggest.
I know, what do you know?
Well, I used to be the energy sense person. Crystal got a dog.
How was your day today, Ryan?
I am the engineer. I